At 06:15 on January 30th, 1944, First Lieutenant Robert Hanson strapped into the cockpit of his F4U-1 Corsair at Piva North airfield, watching 18 Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers taxi into position for the most dangerous mission in the Pacific theater. 23 years old, 21 confirmed kills in 17 days. 1 week until he was scheduled to rotate home. Japanese intelligence had counted 70 fighter aircraft at Rabaul, the fortress base that held Simpson Harbor. The math was simple. 8. Marine Corsairs escorting 18 torpedo bombers into a hornet's nest defended by 70 enemy fighters. The Marine Corps had lost 43 pilots over Rabaul since November. The Japanese knew every approach vector. They had radar stations on every hilltop. Anti-aircraft batteries ringed the harbor. Hanson had arrived in the South Pacific in June 1943 with Marine Fighting Squadron 214, the Black Sheep Squadron. His first combat kill came on August 4th, a single Kawasaki Ki 61, Tony fighter over Vela La Vela. By the end of August, he had 2 confirmed victories. Then came November 1st, Empress Augusta Bay. Hanson attacked 6 Japanese torpedo bombers single-handedly during the Bougainville landings, forced 3 of them to jettison their bombs before they reached the beach, shot down 3 more. The rear gunner of a Nakajima B5N2, Kate, caught him with a burst that shredded his fuel tank. Hanson brought the burning Corsair down on the ocean, 6 hours in a rubber life raft. USS Sigourney picked him up after dark. He transferred to Marine Fighting Squadron 215 in October, the Fighting Corsairs. By early January 1944, his total stood at 5 confirmed kills. Then something changed. January 14th, Simpson Harbor. Hanson got separated from his squadron during a high-altitude bomber escort, found himself alone above a formation of Japanese fighters preparing to jump the American bombers. He dove straight into the middle of their formation, shot down 5 Mitsubishi A6M-0s in 12 minutes, landed with 14 bullet holes in his Corsair and 3 gallons of fuel remaining. The other pilots started calling him Butcher Bob. January 20th, 1 0 destroyed. January 22nd, 2 zeros and 1 Tony. January 24th, 4 zeros in another solo engagement when he got cut off from his division over Simpson Harbor. Again, the Medal of Honor citation would later describe how he waged a lone and gallant battle against hostile interceptors, striking with devastating fury. January 26th, 3 more zeros. 16 days, 21 confirmed kills. The nickname spread through every squadron in the South Pacific. Butcher Bob Hanson, the India-born son of Methodist missionaries who had become a wrestling champion in Lucknow before joining the Marines. The other pilots watched him with a mixture of admiration and unease. Hanson flew with a cold mathematical precision that bordered on recklessness. He did not avoid combat. He hunted it. When Japanese formations appeared, other pilots maintained formation discipline. Hanson broke formation and dove straight into the enemy. His commanding officer, Major Robert Owens, had tried to ground him twice, told him he had done enough. Hanson was scheduled to rotate back to the United States on February 10th, 1 week, and he would be on a transport ship heading home. But January 30th was different. Intelligence reported a major Japanese convoy movement near Rabaul. Every available bomber would hit Simpson Harbor. Every available fighter would escort them. If you want to see how Hanson's final hunt over Rabaul turned out, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Hanson. The briefing officer marked the map with red grease pencil. Approach from the southeast. Bombers would come in at 12,000 FT. Fighters would maintain high cover at 15,000. Expected enemy response: massive. Hanson walked to his Corsair in the pre-dawn darkness. Bureau number 56039. The same aircraft he had flown for the past month, the same inverted gull-wing fighter that had carried him through 6 consecutive missions over the most heavily defended target in the Pacific. The engine caught on the third blade, that distinctive sound of the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial, 2,000 horsepower, 417 mph maximum speed. At 0648, Hanson taxied into position. The Corsair ahead of him lifted off. Then it was his turn. By 0730, the formation crossed the northern coast of Bougainville. Simpson Harbor was 90 miles ahead. Hanson checked his ammunition. 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns, 400 rounds per gun, 2,400 rounds total. Over the radio, the bomber leader called out the approach vector. The ET Corsair pilots acknowledged. Hanson switched to squadron frequency, and then someone spotted them. 21 Japanese fighters climbing out of Rabaul to meet the incoming strike. The Japanese formation was climbing through 9,000 F-21 fighters. Intelligence had identified the types through binoculars from observation posts on Bougainville. 17 Mitsubishi A6M0s, 4 Nakajima Ki-44 Shoki fighters that the Americans called Tojos. The Zero had ruled Pacific skies for 2 years. Maximum speed 331 mph. Rate of climb 3,000 ft per minute. Turn radius so tight that American pilots called it supernatural. 2 20mm cannons and 2 7.7mm machine guns. In a turning fight, the Zero could outmaneuver anything the Americans flew. The Corsair had an 86 mph speed advantage in level flight. Better armor, more firepower. But the Zero could turn inside it every time. Marine Corps doctrine was simple. Never turn with a Zero. Use speed and altitude. Dive, attack, climb away. Never get slow. Never get into a turning fight. Hanson had violated that doctrine 16 times in 17 days. The bomber leader called out the enemy formation high and to the north. The 8 Corsair pilots acknowledged. Standard doctrine said maintain formation. Protect the bombers. Let the enemy come to you. Hanson rolled inverted and dove. The other 7 Corsair pilots held position with the bombers. They had seen Hanson do this before. He would slash through the enemy formation, disrupt their attack, force them to break formation and pursue him instead of the bombers. It was tactically sound. One fighter sacrificing positioning to scatter 21 attackers, draw them away from the vulnerable torpedo bombers. It was also statistically suicidal. Hanson was diving alone into a formation 21 times his number. The mathematics of combat said he would be dead in 90 seconds. The Corsair accelerated through 400 mph in the dive. Hanson picked his target, the lead. Zero in the formation. Standard tactic: kill the leader, scatter the formation. At 800 yards, the Japanese pilot spotted him. The formation began to turn. Too late. Hanson had altitude and speed. The lead Zero was growing larger in his gun sight. 600 yards, 500. The Zero was turning hard left, trying to evade. 400 yards. Hanson pressed the trigger. All 6 50 caliber machine guns opened fire. The convergence pattern was set for 300 yards. At that range, all 6 streams of bullets would intersect at a single point. The tracers walked into the Zero's fuselage. The fighter shuddered. Pieces flew off the engine cowling. Black smoke poured from the engine. The Zero rolled over and went into a spin. 1 down, 20 remaining. Hanson pulled out of the dive at 5,000 ft. The Corsair's speed carried him through the Japanese formation before they could react. He reversed course and climbed. The Japanese formation had broken. 15 fighters were turning to pursue Hanson. 6 were continuing toward the bombers. The tactical goal was achieved. The formation was scattered. The bombers had breathing room. But now Hanson had 15 Japanese fighters on his tail. The closest Zero was 400 yards behind him and closing. The Corsair was faster in level flight, but Hanson was climbing. The Zero climbed faster. The distance was shrinking, 350 yards, 300. At 280 yards, the Zero opened fire. Tracers streaked past Hanson's canopy. One round punched through the vertical stabilizer. Another hit the left wing root. Neither strike was critical. Hanson pushed the throttle to maximum power. The Pratt & Whitney screamed. The Corsair was producing every ounce of thrust the engine could deliver, but he was still climbing. The Zero was still closing. At 240 yards, Hanson snap-rolled right. The Zero tried to follow, but could not match the roll rate. Hanson completed the roll and dove again. The Zero followed, but now the geometry had changed. The Zero was behind Hanson, but no longer in a favorable firing position. Hanson was diving again, building speed again. The separation increased, 260 yards, 300. Hanson leveled off at 3,000 FT, pulled back on the stick. The Corsair climbed vertically, 4,000 AF and 5,000, 6,000. The airspeed was bleeding off. 300 Memmings Mach 280, 260. At the top of the climb, Hanson rolled inverted and looked down. 14 Japanese fighters were below him in a loose formation, searching. The Japanese formation was scattered across 5,000 FT of altitude. They had lost sight of Hanson during his vertical climb. Some were circling at 3,000 FT. Others had climbed to 7,000. The tactical discipline had collapsed. They were no longer a formation. They were individual hunters searching for prey. Hanson had altitude advantage again, 7,000 FT above the lowest group of Japanese fighters. In aerial combat, altitude was life. The pilot with altitude could choose when to engage, could dive to attack, or climb to escape. He rolled right and dove on the nearest Zero. The Japanese pilot never saw him coming. Hanson's dive brought him in from the Zero's 6 o'clock high, the blind spot. By the time the Zero pilot detected the threat, Hanson was at 300 yards and firing. The 650 caliber machine guns fired at a combined rate of 4,800 rounds per minute, 80 rounds per second. At 300 yards, with proper convergence, those 80 rounds per second concentrated into a space smaller than a bathtub. The Zero disintegrated. The right wing folded upward. The fuselage broke in half. Pieces tumbled through the sky. No parachute appeared. 2 down, 19 remaining. But now every Japanese pilot knew exactly where Hanson was. A lone Corsair diving through their formation. Tracers converged from 3 directions. Hanson pulled hard left. The G-forces crushed him into his seat. 4 Gs. 5. The edges of his vision went grey. 3 Zeros were pursuing. Hanson leveled off and accelerated. 400 knots MEPT, 410. The Zeros could not keep pace. The distance opened, 500 yards, 600. But 4 more Zeros were climbing to cut him off. They had anticipated his escape vector. Hanson saw them at 800 yards, climbing from below and ahead. Classic pincer movement. 3 behind, 4 ahead. 7 fighters total converging on 1 Corsair. Hanson pulled into a vertical climb again. The Corsair had a better power-to-weight ratio than the Zero below 10,000 FT. He could outclimb them if he maintained speed. The altimeter unwound, 8,000 FT, 9,000, 10,000. The 4 Zeros ahead were still climbing to intercept. They were at $11,000 FT. Hanson was at 10,500 and climbing. The geometry was closing. 700 yards, 600, 500. At 450 yards, both formations opened fire simultaneously. Tracers filled the space between them. Hanson's rounds hit the lead Zero in the engine. The Japanese fighter rolled left and fell. Away, trailing smoke. 3 down, 18 remaining. But return fire from the 3 remaining Zeros ahead stitched across Hanson's Corsair. 1 round punched through the instrument panel. Glass exploded across the cockpit. Another round hit the right wing, tearing a 2-foot hole in the fabric-covered control surface. A third round hit the armor plate behind Hanson's seat. The plate held. Hanson rolled inverted and dove again. The 3 Zeros ahead tried to follow, could not match his roll. Rate. He came out of the dive heading south at 390 Mantika. The Japanese formation was reforming below him, 15 fighters. They had given up the scattered pursuit. Now they were forming a defensive circle, standard Japanese tactic, mutual support. Any attacker diving on one fighter would immediately come under fire from the others in the circle. Hanson climbed to 12,000 tantieft, circled the Japanese formation at a distance, evaluating. The bomber strike on Simpson Harbor was complete. The TBF Avengers were heading back toward Bougainville. The other 7 Corsairs from Hanson's squadron were with them. The mission was accomplished. The bombers were safe. Tactical doctrine said Hanson should disengage, rejoin the bombers, escort them home. He had already shot down 3 enemy fighters, disrupted their attack, protected the strike force, but 15 Japanese fighters were still airborne, still a threat to any American aircraft in the area. Hanson checked his ammunition counter. He had fired approximately 800 rounds, 1,600 rounds remaining, enough for 2 more extended engagements. He rolled the Corsair over and dove toward the Japanese circle. The Japanese defensive circle was rotating counterclockwise at 8,000 Tojos fast 15 fighters, maintaining spacing of approximately 200 yards between each aircraft. Standard Imperial Navy doctrine developed in China, refined over New Guinea. When one fighter came under attack, the fighter behind would immediately have a clear shot at the attacker. American pilots called it the Loughbury Circle, a death trap for any fighter that committed to an attack on a single target. The mathematics were brutal. Engage one fighter, get shot by the next one in the circle. Hanson dove toward the circle from 12,000 to 4,000 feet of altitude advantage, speed building through 420 mm foe. But this time, he was not targeting a single fighter. He was targeting the geometry of the circle itself. At 1,000 yards from the circle, Hanson adjusted his dive angle. Instead of diving through the circle perpendicular to its rotation, he dove at a tangent. His attack vector was aligned with the circle's direction of rotation. He would pass through the formation moving in the same direction as the Japanese fighters, not against them. The relative closure rate dropped from 800 mph to less than 200. At 600 yards, the Japanese pilots spotted him. The circle began to break. Too late. Hanson was already firing. His 6 machine guns targeted the nearest Zero. The convergence point was perfect. The Zero's cockpit disintegrated. The fighter went inverted and fell. 4 down, 17 remaining. Hanson pulled out of his dive inside the circle. Instead of climbing away, he rolled level and accelerated along the same path as the rotating fighters. He was now part of their formation, flying with them, not against them. The tactical geometry had inverted. The Japanese fighters behind Hanson in the circle could not fire without hitting their own aircraft ahead. The fighters ahead could not turn back to engage without colliding with the fighters behind them. Hanson had 3 seconds before the formation collapsed completely. He selected the Zero 200 yards ahead, fired a 2-second burst. The Zero's left wing separated from the fuselage. The fighter snap-rolled right and went into a flat spin. 5 down, 16 remaining. The Japanese circle shattered. Fighters broke in every direction. 3 rolled left, 4 rolled right. The remaining 9 scattered vertically. The mutual support had collapsed. The formation had become a furball. Individual fighters maneuvering independently.